Of Christmas holidaymakers could face long waits at the UK's airports as Border Force officials go on strike.
Employees at Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Birmingham and Glasgow airports are due to walk out for 8 days over the holiday. Paul Charles is a travel industry commentator. Paul, thanks for joining us. It sounds like a lot of disruption. What do we know about the days involved and what sort of impact we're going to experience?
Sadly, there will be disruption. There are 8 days of strikes by some Border Force officials at the key airports across the UK, including Heathrow, Gatwick and Manchester, as well as the port of Newhaven. So it's also affecting ferry passengers. But the bulk of passengers who will be affected will be those arriving into those key airports between this Friday, the 23rd of December, and New Year's Eve on the 31st of December. And it's a pretty tough 8-day strike. Obviously, workers are asking for more money in the face of high inflation. But for many travellers, of course, who will be arriving at those airports, they are likely to face long delays. And that could mean queues of passengers coming out of the airports, but also being left on planes as well after they've landed.
Any sort of mitigating activities taking place to make the experience easier for passengers? Will some of the staff be working, or are the airports bringing in other staff?
That's a really good question. What we're seeing is a hardened UK government refusing to negotiate on higher pay. So they're bringing in military backup. They're bringing in army workers who will do the job of those border officials. But there's no way they're going to be able to do the job completely. So there will be disruption. And what's been going on behind the scenes is that Heathrow, in particular, have asked British Airways and Virgin Atlantic to stop selling tickets over that period for those arriving in the UK. Also, airlines have been asked to come up with contingency plans for what they will do with passengers who have to stay on planes because the terminals will be too busy. And that means that airlines are having to look at how they will feed and give water and other drinks to passengers in case they're stuck on planes for upwards of 2 or 3 hours waiting to get into the terminals. And that is a possibility.
I mean, Paul, this is turning into a season of industrial action for the UK in general. Do you think Border Force operators have seen this as an opportunity? Do you think there's a connection?
Well, there's enormous frustration among many key workers, not just in Border Force, as you say, but also on British Railways, in our hospitals, among Royal Mail workers. There's this deepening frustration that their pay rates are not going up as high as inflation, and the government's refusing to budge on increasing rates. Border Force officials themselves have been uptight and angry for some time about deteriorating conditions in our airports, so they feel now is the time to protest, and this is one of the peak periods of the year, so they're determined to make sure the public are aware just how angry they are about these conditions.
I mean, Paul, stepping back a bit, looking at the general wider industry, what kind of a year has it had post-pandemic 2022?
It's actually been a more encouraging year in the main since COVID. Obviously, what you've seen is border restrictions being removed as countries recover. That means airlines have been able to get flying again, get their schedules nearly back to normal. Most airlines are flying around 15 to 20% fewer planes than they were before the pandemic, but they're becoming more profitable. So airlines themselves and airports have become much more profitable during 2022. They had a very, very good summer in the main and a very good third and fourth quarter, albeit for us as passengers, we faced a lot of issues, of course, at airports around the world, namely Schiphol in Amsterdam and Heathrow in London, where bags were going missing and huge delays built up due to a shortage of airport workers being able to deal with us as passengers. So the good news is the industry is back, but it's not quite as profitable as it was pre-pandemic. It will be next year. And the challenges remain, of course, around cost of living crisis and high inflation feeding through to higher ticket prices. So we'll see what impact that has in 2023.
Indeed, Paul, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Paul Charles there.